Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DMs Guild review, my written and video view series. We'll take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. For this video, I'll be reviewing the Icewind Dale Rime of the Frostmaiden supplements Ythryn Expanded Towers of Magic, designed by Daniel Kahn. This review has been sponsored by the publisher, and a review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you are interested in a sponsored review, please reach out via email, Twitter, or on our Discord server, or in my submission form at roguewatson.com. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your online shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. I have to give a spoiler warning at the top of this review. Massive, massive, massive spoilers for Icewind Dale Rime of the Frostmaiden. In fact, even the cover image is technically a spoiler, but it's there on the DMs Guild, so at some point you're just going to get spoiled about maybe what some of the chapters are involved in that campaign. What this is, I'm reviewing a bundle, which means I'm actually reviewing 8 different supplements that you can purchase separately or together as the Ythryn Expanded Towers of Magic. So huge spoilers for Icewind Dale Rime of the Frostmaiden, specifically the final chapter. You are playing that campaign with a heavy heart. I have to say, do not watch this review. But if you are DMing the campaign, or you have played the campaign or whatever, then please strap in, because this is a fantastic supplement and bundle. Each one of these hugely recommended. What this does is this fixes a grossly underdeveloped section of the campaign. So again, spoilers. Once the players make it to Ythryn, which is this Netheril city buried under the ice that's supposed to be the big classic, like, Uncharted Nathan Drake, final Lost City set piece area, very similar to Omu in Tomb of Annihilation. Now, Omu, for those of you, I'm going to slightly spoil Tomb of Annihilation, by the way. You have to go along to all these different shrines and then complete some kind of puzzle or combat encounter or something in order to gain this little puzzle cube, and then you put these cubes into this other puzzle, and then you access the final mega Tomb of the Nine Gods dungeon. When I initially looked at Rime of the Frostmaiden, I thought, okay, this is a very similar narrative structure that they put together, which is, here's another lost city, and you have to go to all these things to unlock the final area. In this case, the final area isn't a big mega dungeon, it's just like a final boss, basically. And each area is one of these arcane towers, and you have to, instead of a puzzle cube, you have to learn this pieces to what's called the Rite of the Arcane Octad, I believe. That's just different lines that tell you how you access this final area. It's like you have to put on a mask, you have to drink poison, all these different lines. So structurally, it seemed very similar. I was like, okay, well, you're given this lost city, and the player's goal is to travel to each of these specific areas, do a thing, get the thing that they need, and then they can access the final area. The problem is, the arcane towers are not the Omu shrines. They do not have these cool little puzzles or riddles or challenging combat encounters or anything like that. They don't even have maps. If for those of you that have played Tomb of Annihilation, all of the shrines have their own little maps. They're all on like one little page. It's hugely disappointing because, I mean, this is an ancient Netherese city. You want to be able to show off some cool stuff. It's all buried under ice. Some of it's preserved, some of it's destroyed. And it's really disappointing. It's really disappointing. A lot of them are just, you walk in to the tower and, like, you might see, like, the High Transmuter has been transformed herself into a statue. And then you just see, like, the writing somewhere, and then you leave. Like, that's the whole tower. And a couple of them are like that. Now, there's maybe 1 or 2 that have a bit more involved. I remember the Tower of Divination had like an orb you could ask questions of, but every time and it was floating eyeballs everywhere inside of it, and every time you asked a question, it plucked an eye out if you like failed a con save or something. That was a little bit interesting. I believe the Tower of Evocation had a bunch of gelatinous cubes that were thawing that would fall down on the players. That has potential, but some of them are just weird. There was like a hag coven hanging out in the Tower of Conjuration. Like, it was just very, very disappointing and lacking. And as of the time of this review, I have confirmed that we are running this campaign for our next big live streamed campaign with our group. I have not yet started it yet, and I've not even started the streaming planning prep that I do. So this is a moment in time right now, and I'm telling you right now, this supplement, technically series of supplements, is so good that I absolutely plan on running them in my campaign. And if you allow me a bit of hubris, that is extremely high praise that I can give. Now, it happens to be that it syncs up that way, where obviously I'm running this campaign anyway, so it's just a godsend to be able to have way better fixes already in place, because that's something that I would look at fixing myself. And now after reading these supplements, I'm like, oh, this is 100% how I would like to enhance all of these towers. Literally, I think I would use all 8 of them. Now, if you stick around to the end of this review, after I go through them, I will rank them, so you can maybe decide which ones, if you trust my thought process, are better than others. But literally, I think all of them are worth getting, which means I think the bundle is 100% worth getting. And this does an expert job at fixing all of those towers, making them more interesting, using elements that are already in place in Ythryn, and in some cases, completely coming up with a new thing, because at least one of the towers in the book, I believe the Tower of Necromancy, is destroyed. It's just a pile of rubble, and the players just have to like dig through the rubble to learn the little piece, I believe. There's a bunch of like crawling claws rolling around the rubble. Like there's just nothing there. And this designer's like, no, fuck that. Like we're making a full tower and it's going to have stuff in it, which is awesome. So we're going to actually go through. And again, these are actually 8 different supplements that I've got all in different tabs right here, which means it's kind of a nightmare for me to review, but I think is actually a really smart way of doing it, because then that allows consumers to just get individual ones if they'd like to. But as I mentioned, I would 100% recommend getting them all. So let's start with the Tower of Abduration. In the book, obviously I'll be referencing the book quite a bit because this is 100% what it fixes. There's really no point in getting this if you're not already running Rime the Frostmaiden and plan on going to Ythryn. Although there is some good content in here you could use, I guess, anywhere for, arcane magic towers that are really small, mini dungeons. So the original Tower of Abduration, the big thing going for it is it had this anvil that destroyed magic items. It was just a thing the players could do if they wanted to interact with it. If they do that, then a tomb trapper comes and fights them, and that's about the extent of what's going on in the original Tower of Abduration. There's not really any point to even doing this. I guess if you had like a cursed item or something, you could destroy it that way, like a One Ring style. So what this does, and honestly, this is probably one of the weaker towers, but still pretty good. The entrance, first of all, involves a fight, and, again, abjuration, so it uses, like, force fields. There's an anti-magic field the players have to fight in, which could definitely be a showstopper for certain parties. And once you make it to the top level, you have to break a magic item in order to get the thing that you need. So again, in all these towers, you need that piece of the right of the Arcane Octad. And there's a good kind of opening page that's the exact same, I believe, on all of these towers. In fact, if I switch between, you can see a lot of it is just copy and pasted. That explains, okay, what is the point of this area? What are the players trying to do? Which is, we're exploring Ythryn, but we're also trying to learn the right of the Arcane Octad from each of these towers. That is the goal. And what this does is it motivates the players to have to do a thing, to have to complete this tower in some way in order to gain that as a reward. So instead of just walking in, seeing a thing, getting the Arcane Octad and walking out, you actually have to engage with the room and do something. And some of it might be a trap, like a gauntlet you have to survive, or some kind of puzzle you have to figure out. In this case, you have to do the Arcane Forge, the Anvil of Disjunction. You have to have a magic item, break it, and then once you do, that will reveal the Arcane Octad piece that you need. Now, it does mention the fact that if the players explore, they can just find an item, and it reminds you that, like, hey, you can use, like, a spell scroll or something to destroy. Technically, that's a magic item. By now, the player should just have something. But I like the idea that they are actually forced to have to do that. And, by the way, the anvil is sentient, and you can talk to the anvil, and it will explain that that's what you have to do. And that's something that the designer smartly inserts into a few of these areas, especially in 2 of them I'll go over, which are amazing, how the Necromancer and Enchanter include some ability to roleplay with things going on here, which is tricky because this is an ancient city that's been lying here for thousands of years. How do you include NPCs that you can actually talk to? Well, in this case, you have a sentient anvil that's been sitting there for a while and just hungers for magic items, and it will, it can be chatty. And the Tomb Trapper stays in, by the way. When you actually leave, the Tomb Trapper then crashes into that anti-magic field room, and then you have to fight that. So it doesn't... This one probably adds the least amount of new content, but I like the little bit of change that says, oh no, you have to use the arcane... what I keep calling it? The Anvil of Disjunction in order to gain the right of the Arcane Octad. By the way, all of these maps you're seeing, are included. Every single tower has full color detailed battle maps that are gorgeous looking. We have DM versions and player versions, gridded and non-gridded versions. I'm gonna do a little dance because I'm so excited about that, because none of the original towers have maps whatsoever. The only map we have is the big kind of 3/4 shot of Ythryn itself, which is a cool map. Omu had a similar one, and the tower of the Demi-Lich's final boss zone has the spire. It's a bigger area, and that's got a map, but none of these little towers, which is why they were all just like little scenes. Whereas this one, and not all of these are combat related, by the way. This one happens to have combat, and a few of them do, but not all of them. It's really impressive that we get maps, and they are freaking awesome looking maps that I absolutely adore. Cartography by Nicole Mastrodomenico. I probably butchered that terribly, I apologize, but holy crap, absolutely amazing work. I love these maps. Super thumbs up for that. So that is the Tower of Abduration. Again, that one's probably one of the weaker ones just because it doesn't really change that much. Tower of Conjuration introduces a full-on interesting puzzle that very much reminded me of Tomb of Annihilation, the latter half with the Tomb of the Nine Gods and everything. There is a familiar in the kind of lobby area. And by the way, all these towers, they're still very small. It doesn't turn them all into big dungeon crawls or anything like that. They're still, most of them are like 2 rooms, one on top of the other typically. I think the only one that isn't is the Tower of Transmutation, which has the full tower. But, a lot of them are like ruined or destroyed in some ways, or it just kind of abstracts the fact that like, hey, most of these rooms are just destroyed and here's like the relevant ones, which I think is a smart way of doing it. Because again, the Omu shrines are pretty small too. So this one has just a familiar on a table, and it is changing forms from different like cat, owl, rat, and snakes. And then when they touch the door, which is glowing, it teleports them into the next room, and then the door shuts off. So it's a dimension door thing. By the way, notice how all of these different towers will use their actual spell schools in cool ways. So dimension doors into this room. There's an ice devil inside an arcane circle that the players can chat with. And of course, there's some interesting, role-playing and socializing the players could do there. Get some information. It's going to try to bargain. And then there is a puzzle where the players have to push, which I love that we're giving this as a separate handout, by the way, that has kind of drawings of all the different animals. And the idea is, hopefully your players don't meta this, the player on this side has to push the animal in the right order, and then the players on the other side can see the animals change, but of course the sequence changes whenever the person enters in there. So you have to have some kind of, telepathy spell or something. And the idea is the original Conjuration wizards had their familiars that could telepathically, communicate to them and push the buttons. All of these different things does a really good job of explaining why it uses that magic, and why specifically a lot of these entrances, for example, the Transmutation one is like just a solid wall, because you're supposed to use Transmutation magic to be able to get into the tower itself. And I love the fact that that's built into, it makes sense for why that tower would have that stuff, and not just kind of a, traps for adventurers to stumble into. Everything feels like it makes sense and does a good job of building up Ythryn. If they push the wrong button, it's just a kind of a pit trap that they fall in. And there's also a, what is it called? Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion, I believe. Or they named it differently, because I guess Mordenkainen probably wasn't around back then. They call it Damorit's Magnificent Mansion. Because that's the High Conjurer's name. Then this is a safe place for them to rest. They just press that button and go in there, and then they can get a bunch of rewards and things if they get the sequence right. So just a nice little puzzle. There's no combat involved whatsoever, unless for some reason the players want to fight that ice devil, but they certainly don't have to. And they get a nice little place to rest. So this is a smart way of enhancing this tower without just throwing, combat at the players necessarily. It's just a fun little puzzle the players have to work out, and it feels like it's checking that exploration box very, very well. And gives us a nice place to long rest, which is pretty cool. Tower of Divination is one of my favorites. So this one I thought was already pretty good in the book. Not great, but at least better than most, where you had the orb that players could, I think, ask questions of, and then it would pluck their eyeballs out, and you could see there was eyeballs floating in there. That was just a fun, again, very Tomb of Annihilation thing that felt creepy but useful. The Tower of Divination does a good job of combining something that's already in Ythryn, which is the observatory. The observatory is a separate area in the Ythryn that has the high observatory wizard person has been transformed into. In fact, I think it might have I don't remember if it was originally broken off from the tower or not. That might have been the actual case. I don't recall that. But it combines them in this one. So it just says, hey, delete the observatory as it is in the book and combine it with the top of this tower. So the observatory is on the top, and the players can still meet the green slod, who can then still talk to the players. She mentioned the fact that, a slod got out of captivity. She was transformed, and that's why she's still alive. Again, great way of including an NPC that the players can socialize with. That is included in the book. It just combines those. But it takes that eye-plucking orb and turns that into the telescope that she's using and makes it so the players, she's looking for her spellbook in order to get the information they need it in that spellbook. So she's looking through this telescope, trying to, like the Eye of Sauron, searching around Ythryn to try to find it, and it even mentions, like, hey, here's a few different places you could put the book to try and encourage the players to go to different areas, like the Wellspring of Answers, the Arboretum. And when they use the spellbook, they have to make that con save, or they lose an eyeball as it plucks out into the thing. And of course, if they say the green slot, like, well, wait, how do you still have your eyes using this all the time? And she's got that green slot regeneration, so it just keeps coming back. So it's something that you could really funny, like, oh, I forgot to mention, it does pluck your eyeballs out. But before they even get to that's not all that's in this tower. Before they get to that, the first level is a planetarium, which is what you see this little fun map here, which I believe I have this map that I can show you all, just so you can get a good example of what these maps look like. So here's, again, you get a zip file with all of these different maps set up. This is the gridded version, really gorgeous art. This is the obviously the player version without any of the annotations on there. So I just wanted to give you an example of what the map art looked like, which I try to do whenever I'm really impressed with the maps, and that one looks absolutely gorgeous. So in the planetarium, the players, again, this is the Tower of Divination. So the players can look up at they've got all these, which I presume is maybe the correct solar system. It's got Toril, it's got the moon, Saloon, there's the sun. And if they touch any of these celestial bodies, then they get some kind of spell put on them. Or in the case of the sun, it's like a delayed blast fireball. And if they look up at the starry sky, then they get a vision of a bunch of Nothics swarming wave after wave into the planetarium and ripping everything apart. And when you come to, you realize you have like seconds to prepare for that to happen. So I love that that's like a form of divination in like a Final Destination-esque scenario where you see like and I think you could definitely play that up as like all the players being like torn apart by all these Nothics and things. And they have a chance to prepare, and you're supposed to like see visions of people touching all these orbs and getting all these different buffs, like the fly spell, or like stone skin or something, depending on what they touch. And then, sure enough, you run this like survival mode battle with a bunch of Nothics, and it's not just CR2 Nothics. We're actually given different Nothic stat blocks: the Nothic Stalker, CR5, and the Nothic Preeminent, CR7. Which, as a slight tease for my campaign that I'm running, I plan on scaling up the players so that the final 2 chapters are tier 3, so it will be very useful for me to be able to use stronger Nothics just in general. So I'm very pleased that we got this. By the way, stat blocks, just any kind of monster that's mentioned in the tower is included as a stat block here, which is always very helpful. I appreciate that. So that's just a cool combat encounter. A really neat area with the planetarium. I think, players just have fun with that, especially if they're all casting spells. And then you go do the observatory thing, and then it's a more social exploration thing. So you literally check like all of the boxes in this one little tower. I love the Tower of Divination so much. The Tower of Enchantment, I'm tempted to skip that one until we do Necromancy, because there's something cool that happens here. So I'm going to skip that and go to Evocation. So the Evocation, this is a good example of the designer has really brought all of the high wizards to life. So there is a one person that's the lead of that school of magic, and they're the high evoker, the high necromancer, or whatever else, high enchanter. And you might see pictures of them like when you go to the museum, and I believe they play into a little bit of the main story whenever you have to, I think, say their name or something whenever you try to unlock like a final door to get to the Demi-Lich's quarters. But we don't really know much about them, and what the designer here does is include a full like little backstory about each one of them and really makes them come to life. Now sometimes that might not come into play too much, but in the case of like the green slod, like that is straight up the high diviner. In the case of the High Evoker Zadalus, he is a champion at the Chain Lightning game. So again, using elements that are already in place in Ythryn is the stadium where the players can play this kind of Quidditch style game that's all magic, enhanced, and has lightning going on. And so his tower is a Chain Lightning stadium, it's a practice room, which I love. It even has like the High Illusionist like put in like cheering stands of people. Of course, since Ythryn is half destroyed, it's malfunctioning, so it's just spewing lightning everywhere. And it becomes kind of a little gauntlet trap where the players have to cross this room while it's spewing lightning everywhere. And it's all kind of, the floor is sticky and things are heating up as the players made it in here because of all the lights and heat sources. And you don't really think anything of it other than the fact that, oh, maybe the stickiness is supposed to slow us down so we get zapped by the lightning more often. Once we make it to the end, which if you have the trophy from completing the games at the Chain Lightning, you make it past the Big B's hands, which I would totally roleplay as they're giving you like a thumbs up or a wave or something. If you've got the trophy in hand, play that up like the players did that unknowingly, like, oh, hey, you passed this like final fight you have to do. But then when you come back into the dungeon, now that sticky floor has suddenly risen up to a bunch of ochre jellies, and now they are going to be fighting the players. Now you may think, as I did, why did we replace gelatinous cubes with ochre jellies? The reason for that is because they're in the middle of that lightning trap, so they're constantly splitting and becoming more ochre jellies. That is an awesome combination, and I absolutely love that. I would probably not want to spring it until the players were just a little bit closer, because I could see that, especially higher level players would be able to just throw, fireballs and shit at the ochre jellies as they're slowly making their way up. But that's a really neat idea, and I love the fact that it uses this Chain Lightning Stadium purely because the designer's like, well, what if the High of Ochre was like a Chain Lightning champion? And there's even a fun little bit where he's got this ring that's a hidden magic ring. It's got that whatever spell on it that makes it not even detect magic. That gives him, it's a ring of evasion, and that's how he cheated in all the games. And you can actually find that, I believe, on his body, in one of the side rooms, which is really fun. So again, that just brings to life like who this evoker was without even really, obviously interacting with it all. The Tower of Illusion, again, draws from things that are already in Ythryn. In this case, it's the theater. But the theater, as it was in the book, was just hugely disappointing. It was like, if the players, for some reason, decide to act out this play that they find scripts of in the theater, then it's super cursed and bad things happen. Why the hell? Like, that's horrible. Like, encourage your players to do fun things. And that's what happens here. I do have one minor complaint, that there's not really a reward if the players do well. Instead, there's just punishments if the players do poorly. And the reward is instead just getting the Rite of the Arcane Octad, the thing that you need from this tower. So you walk in, it's literally a theater. There's a programmed illusion of the High Illusionist that shows up and says, hey, as my last act, while Ythryn was crashing, I wanted to put on my last big performance in my play, so please come in, put on costumes, and here's the scripts, and please put on a performance. And it's a whole bunch of programmed illusions as the audience that are, of course, very fickle. And I think the right group could have a lot of fun with this. The actual play is a hilarious little scene that is full of melodrama and just the perfect kind of tone to set for players just goofing off and making fun. And it's basically a skill challenge. Like, yes, they role play, but also you're supposed to roll, which I would allow advantage if they did very well, roll different checks to be able to complete all these different lines and scenes. Usually performance checks, but it might be like a stealth check if you have to like slink away after being killed or something. It's a really smart and well done, and I did enjoy it quite a bit. And it does a better job of enhancing what should be the theater section. I don't think it mentions the fact that you should delete the theater like it did on the observatory, but I probably would at that point. I would just remove the theater from Ythryn, because who's going to miss that the way it's written, and just include this as the Tower of Illusion, which does a pretty fun job. But as I mentioned, there's no reward from what I can remember if the players do particularly well in the skill challenge, whereas I would definitely want to reward them. There is a fun little iRobot, I swear this is from the iRobot movie, where if you try to ask the programmed illusions other questions, he says, I'm sorry, my responses are limited. You'll have to ask the right questions. That was a funny little note. Tower of Necromancy is my favorite tower. Holy crap. This one, the designer had to build from the ground up because it is destroyed in the book. So what are they going to do? What are we going to do with the Tower of Necromancy? Because there's nothing in the book that we can use. Well, what we can do is, again, draw from what's in Ythryn with the whole ritual of the brain in the jar, extracting brains from wizards, ostensibly, and putting them in jars. And then you've got the whole Futurama, like, floating head thing, and that's how you've got a lot of these original characters from the Tower of Ythryn. I believe one of them is a apprentice, I think, of Erolithus that is attached to a, what is it? The Helmed Horror. Sorry, I slipped through the book. So it takes that and says, this is where it happened. This is what the High Necromancer was interested in doing, which makes sense. He is Well, he's interesting. He's on the top floor. You make it to the first floor, and it's the laboratory, and there's a Nothic chained up, and you meet Lawrence. Lawrence is this little fantastic NPC, a brain in the jar. Lawrence is a little nuts because he's been very alone, but friendly. And he uses crawling claws as hands. He can use a mage hand to manipulate things. And he draws facial expressions on his cylinder depending on his moods. What a fucking fantastic NPC. I love Lawrence so much. Absolutely incredible. I could see this being an instant fan and group favorite the minute we meet Lawrence. And it even says, definitely comic relief. And he's friendly and fun. He doesn't have any, evilness, but he's definitely a scientist that, doesn't have a whole lot of morality with him. I just think that's hilarious and awesome. And the players can absolutely choose to help him. The only thing he's in denial about that might turn him hostile is he doesn't like the fact that his master is dead. However, and by the way, the players could, if they wanted to, involve themselves in the brain transfer, and it even mentions in a very nice troubleshooting section, which I've been kind of glossing over because I'm trying to cover as much as I can. But every single one of these tower supplements has a troubleshooting section, which honestly should be in every supplement I read from now on. It's that good. And it's basically, hey, here's how to fix this area, or here's some problems that may come up, or things that I've anticipated your players might want to do. Just a whole lot of just helpful tips for DMs. So in this case, one of them is if you wanted to replace that Nothic that's chained up to the table with something else, you could do that. Like maybe a drow would make sense because there's a drow at the end of the Caves of Hunger that have maybe made it into Ythryn. If a player wanted to be a brain in the jar, then they could go through with the process, and then you could give them, basically turn them mechanically into a warforged by giving them a mechanical body and saying, hey, here's if you want to transform into this. Or you could use that as somebody who was a dead player. Say that maybe they, hey, go grab their brain and we can give them a new body or something. So all of this information is included in troubleshooting, as well as how to deal with what the High Necromancer does, and this is fucking incredible. So when you make it upstairs, you find the High Necromancer's body is in perfectly preserved condition. A gentle repose spell has been cast over the entire tower. So his body, thousands of years old, still sitting there on the floor, dead. But he casts Soul Jar on a nearby emerald. And as soon as the party starts making in, he starts trying to possess them. And he will hopefully succeed, because you literally have a handout that explains you are now possessed by the High Necromancer. You are now this level spellcaster. Like, you become this person. Now, that is a very tricky thing to pull off. And it does mention several times, like, hey, make sure, you target a player who's going to be on board with this. And importantly, he is not a villain. He has a singular goal, and that is he wants to be reunited with his lover. And his lover is the High Enchanter, who he has given the crown to. So if you recall in the original book, when you make it to the Tower of Enchantment, you find the High Enchanter has been, she put like this crown on her head that's cursed, and it's put her in this kind of lobotomized coma state. And in this version, he has given her that crown as an anti-aging tool, and basically is saying like, okay, if she survived, then she's still perfectly fine. We need to go find her. And granted, he's kind of nuts because he's been trapped in this fucking like emerald for thousands of years, and that's all he cares about. It's the only thing keeping him going is he wants to see his love again. It's tragic, it's romantic, it's fantastic. And if he possesses somebody, then he will literally hold up his emerald and be like, look, this is all I want to do. Like, everybody, like, come with me and let's do this. Hopefully, and I think the designer smartly put the Tower of Enchantment, I believe, is one of the furthest towers away that the players would naturally get to. So hopefully they do this one before that one, because otherwise it kind of changes the story a bit as a downer if they already gone to the Tower of Enchantment and just kind of tell them about it. But hopefully you make it to Necromancy first. Or you could just swap the towers around if you need to. Absolutely incredible twist, though. Freaking phenomenal. I love that idea. So I love Lawrence as an NPC, and I love that the High Necromancer is still alive and can possess a player, and then they become that stat block. But they have a very specific goal, which is to then go to the Tower of Enchantment and see his long-lost love. So we're going to cover the Tower of Enchantment now, which, as I mentioned, in the original text is just you walk in, you find her, like Kurt, and you don't even have to do anything with it. You just see the writing, the Rite of the Arcane Octet somewhere, and you could leave if you wanted to. If you take the crown off, then she just withers away and dies because she just ages up really quick. It's kind of dumb. What this does is it introduces one of the coolest creatures from I want to say Mordenkainen's Tomb of Foes, which is the Ublex. And anybody who knows about the Ublex is already smiling and nodding along. And you walk in. First of all, there's mimic carpets, which is kind of a fun idea. Just, you don't expect a fucking like rolled up carpet to turn into a mimic, but that's always neat. And the High Enchantress just comes down the stairs. She's like, "Oh, thank goodness you're here. I have to show you something." And you're like, "What the fuck?" She's still walking around. She's still, but and she's got that crown on. So you're thinking, okay, there's something off here. And of course, if the High Necromancer is there, she's like, "Oh," and they embrace and kiss and everything. And you're like, "Oh, this is wonderful." And a very astute player might see a small tether going from the High Enchantress, and you make it upstairs, and sure enough, an Ublex has been devouring her mind because she's been sitting in this chair, just not aging, so perfectly fine, but just in absolute hell because she has been attacked from the inside out by this horrible ooze creature. I would probably, if I'm running this, I would scale it up with the Ublex to have more of its tethered creatures kind of around, just to turn this into a really crazy cool mini boss fight. But I understand this is originally designed for levels, whatever it is, 9, 10, 11-ish, I think, for the original campaign. But just turning that into like an Ublex fight is freaking awesome. Like, that's amazing. What a cool use of that creature. Very appropriate because it's got a preserved, intelligent, highly intelligent, arcane creature there that it can feed off of. Just all of that makes sense. And the reason it's there is because the Netheril wizards were using it as a device. They called it Hippocaris, which was like a psychotherapy device they could hook you up to. So it was like in a containment unit, and the players could ostensibly capture it and put it back in the containment unit and access more spells. So it all makes sense. It expands like what's going on in Netheril society, and there's even a bit like in the troubleshooting section and in the development section where the players could play all their, it's meant to be tragic. Like once they defeat the Ublex and they find her behind the curtain and they see that she's just been completely like lobotomized, and of course he's like distraught and he kills him. It's just fucking Romeo and Juliet. Like he gives up his own life and the player gets their own body back. It could be this big emotional moment. Or if the players have access to high level spells like Greater Restoration, Modify Memory, they could try to fix everything. Now, granted, it's going to take a 9th level Modify Memory spell to fix the High Enchantress trauma that she's gone through over thousands of years. But if the players have access to that, or maybe you give them, a spell scroll or something for that, they could rescue them, and then they could become, it says, feel indebted to the party and do what they can to aid them. Neither will be willing to fight Earl at this because they know, he's the head honcho, but that could be crazy. And then you've got like original Netheril wizards with that's so cool and crazy. And I love the tragic love story there, the connection between them. It's does such a great job of expanding on Ythryn's lore that's really only just teased upon in the book, and this does such a better job of expanding on that. Finally, the Tower of Transmutation. Unfortunately, I'm going to end up on one of the weaker ones as well. This one, you do get the full tower, but only really 2 levels are there. There is a opportunity for players to make the Magans or Magens, which are the kind of arcane constructs that serve as basically Netheril's minions or butlers or servants or whatever. And they can make their own by giving up some of their life force and solving just a little bit of a puzzle. And then the other puzzle is you have to lift a stone slab under the pressure plate, which is, we get a nice little side view here on the ceiling, very, transmutation-y. And then the bottom, I think that like a pass wall spell is activated where you can go into the bottom vault, which is where the Rite of the Arcane Octet is, and some treasures. But then it seals up after a time. So this one feels a little bit problematic just because there's a lot of chances for the things to go wrong and the players get themselves stuck. It does mention, hey, put an oil of etherealness down there the players could use to escape and all this. It's okay. It's just not quite as impressive as the other areas. And even I said the weakest one is still better than anything in the book by far. All right, so if you made it this far, it's a very long review because I wanted to touch on everything because it's amazing all the way through. Ranking the towers. Here is my ranking. You may have a guess based on how much I fawned or not fawned over some of the towers, but here is my overall ranking from best tower to weakest, and I want to stress the fact that even I think the weakest one is better than the one in the book. Number 1, Tower of Necromancy. Fucking Lawrence is an NPC, the High Necromancer possessing somebody. That is absolutely incredible. Number 2, Divination. I love the Planetarium, and I love the combination of the Observatory. Number 3, Enchantment. Ublex, come on, that's amazing. Hopefully our players have the possessed Necromancer with them because that really takes it up to 11. Number 4, Evocation. I love the use of the Chain Lightning practice room and the ochre jelly splitting. Illusion just seems like a really fun. I didn't go over what the play was. That's another separate handout. But a really fun way of doing a skill challenge as a performance play. And again, something the players probably wouldn't expect to have to do in this final dungeon. And I think that's a really fun opportunity. Then we get to the ones that are just kind of okay, which is the Conjuration has a neat little puzzle in there and a chance for them to rest. There's a funny butler the players can talk to, I believe, in the mansion. Abduration doesn't have the biggest change, just, you know, some anti-magic fields, and then the Anvil of Disjunction they actually can talk to, and they have to break a magic item on. And then Transmutation just being what I think is kind of a weakish puzzle, but still, again, better than anything that's in the book. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the Ythryn Expanded Towers of Magic, which is the name of the bundle. Pro, each expanded tower can be purchased separately or as part of a discounted bundle. I believe if you want like 7 or 8 of them, then you should purchase the bundle. If you want 6 or fewer, then maybe you can purchase them a la carte. And as you just saw my ranking, that would be my recommendation. But I would ultimately recommend the whole damn thing, unless for some reason you just think it's too much Ythryn and you don't want to shut down. Kind of similar to what Tomb of Annihilation did with Omu, where it's like, hey, the Red Wizards have gathered some of the cubes and already done some of these things. That would be maybe worth doing if you want to just shut down some of the towers completely. Pro, the troubleshooting section includes helpful notes and tips for adjusting different scenes, puzzles, and combat encounters. Every single tower section here has this really nice troubleshooting area that is just incredibly helpful and gives a lot of really nice, friendly notes for DMs on how to handle different things, either adjusting combat encounters, helping out stuck players in the puzzles, addressing serious issues like, hey, if your players are not cool with suicide, then don't have the High Necromancer kill himself after seeing his love like that. Like, you know, everything is included. Pro, the Tower of Necromancy stands out as an incredible avenue for role-playing opportunities. One with Lawrence here and the Brain Jar, just an absolutely incredible character, and then the Possession with the Necromancer himself, who actually has a built-in important goal, just top tier, absolutely incredible. All relevant stat blocks including new Nothic variants, which I believe are the Tower of Divination, gives us those new Nothics, but I like that we get all the stat blocks included regardless. And Pro, full color, detailed player maps and handouts for each tower. Woof, what a complete package. Cons, none. This is fucking an amazing product. 99% chance this will be on my top 10 DMs Guild products that I reviewed this year. Final verdict, Ythryn Expanded Towers of Magic expertly fixes, expands, and enhances a critically underdeveloped area, making this a must-have supplement bundle for Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson. You can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.